Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow, with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter, and on TikTok. Folks, it's great to be back on this Wednesday evening, and we, as usual, have a packed show for you. We're going to be looking at the big news today, which was the state opening of Parliament, and Keir Starmer's speech, which was delivered by the King. And we're going to be looking at what that means going forward this year. And we're going to be speaking about that, especially with our guest at the bottom of the hour, which is YouTube personality and firm favourite of this show, Ash, that Preston journalist, who is knocking it out the park as far as YouTube content is concerned, and has been so doing since he started his amazing YouTube channel. Doing so well, Ash. Congratulations. And we're going to be looking forward to talking with Ash at the bottom of the hour. He's coming on at 7:30. Now, before then, we're going to be looking at the incredible amount of money which the SNP has lost as a consequence of being reduced from what it got previously, which was 48 MPs, down to 9 MPs. An astonishing amount of money that they're going to lose over a 5-year period. We'll be getting into that just shortly. We're also going to be looking at the pageantry of the state opening of Parliament, because the state opening of Parliament, which is one of the great British political moments of the year, always brings out some people to complain about it. So we're going to be addressing some of them oft-heard complaints and knocking those into out of the ring again. Hello to everybody watching on TikTok. Now, at the bottom of the hour on TikTok, we will be having our interview, and that will be on YouTube and on Facebook and on X, formerly known as Twitter. So at that stage, you may want to switch over to x.com/UK, a force for good. But if you're watching on any channel, please do give us a thumbs up. Please give us a like. Please click the heart button on TikTok. If you're watching on X, please do repost this. Please do repost this, because that's the way we get our message out. And we've been getting some good viewing figures in the last few weeks. So let's try to keep those viewing figures up if we can. And if you're watching on YouTube and you're not already following us, please do subscribe. Just hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications, and you will be told when we are broadcasting, which is always once a week on a Wednesday between 7 and 8 p.m. So thanks to all the folks coming in. Tell us what you think about unionism. Tell us what you think about Keir Starmer. Tell us what you think about his plans. Is he going to mess up the country, or is he going to do a better job than the Tories? Which could still be messing up the country as well, because at the end of the day, they had their issues. Who's in first tonight? It was Derek. There you go. Good evening, Alistair and fellow unionists around the world. Hope everyone is doing great. We're doing great in Great Britain, Derek. Debbie says, good evening, everyone. Trump was one lucky guy this week. Wasn't he just? Oh my. It doesn't bear thinking about. TC says, good evening to all fellow unionists everywhere. Always nice to see TC in the house. And Derek is always here from the great village of Armadale, as is Alan from the great British city of Dundee, who also said goodbye to the SNP a couple of weeks ago, didn't they? Or was there any SNP people remaining in Dundee? Please remind us if you know, Alan. Cammy Gray 7 says that he went from a yes voter to a no voter. Well, Cammy, a lot of people have made exactly that same transition. Perfectly understandable. Somebody's asking, why have we got the Lion Rampant in the background? I meant to explain to you today. The Lion Rampant is what's known as the royal banner of Scotland, and it is essentially the King and Queen's banner in Scotland. And it was the Queen's birthday today, 77th birthday to Queen Camilla. Happy birthday. So we thought we would wave the royal banner as a little birthday commemoration. And this is a slightly different flag from what's called the Royal Standard of Scotland, which is the four-quartered flag, which we've had on before. We had on 2 or 3 weeks ago. That's the Royal Standard. This is the Royal Banner of Scotland, which has got your Lion Rampant there. It's meant to date from around about the time of Alexander II, which was back in the 12-somethings. Good. Well, we've been reading a lot of commentary about what the Starmer government is going to do for Scotland specifically, and how it's going to help or hinder the cause of keeping the UK together, which is what we're all about here. You know, here at A Force for Good, we're British, we love the United Kingdom, we work to keep it together. And that's, as we always say, that's not like something that you can really take a break from, because the people who want to break it up are not taking a break from breaking it up. And it's like a constant battle. Sometimes they're ahead, sometimes we're ahead, sometimes we're relatively even, but we move forward in our respective ways, hoping to persuade as many people in Scotland and throughout the United Kingdom of the merits of keeping the UK together. And so how will this presumably 5-year period of Keir Starmer affect Scotland? Let's have a little consideration about that. And it was fired up by this article, which was written by Magnus Gardam, who was special advisor to former Secretary of State for Scotland, Sir Alistair Jack. And I remember he was also a Herald journalist. And he says, with Labour in power, SNP moaning will get much shorter shrift. And he makes some interesting points here. And he says, the vast bulk of the Tories' time in power pitted a UK government that was unpopular in Scotland against Holyrood that was more popular. It was easy for the SNP to do what it enjoys best, generate friction and foment phony grievances as a means to drive support for independence. It will be harder for them to pursue the same approach with a Labour government that has proved its popularity in Scotland by gubbing them in an election. And that's a good point, because the SNP can't really say, oh, nobody voted for Labour. You know, they used to do that with the Tories, and it wasn't true, because a lot of people did vote for the Tories. Just under the first past the post system, it wasn't necessarily recompensed in seats, but this time it's very clearly been rewarded in seats for Labour. So it's going to be much harder for the SNP to try to pretend that the UK government doesn't have any legitimacy. And he uses the example here of the post-Brexit UK Internal Market Act, which it was intended to ensure a degree of regulatory harmony across the UK and allow the UK government to spend money directly in Scotland on devolved policy areas such as transport or the arts, something that we've always recommended that they do. And as he says here, this is perfectly sensible, which means it is anathema to the SNP. And sure enough, Mr. Swinney demanded during the election that a new Labour government repeal the Act. Well, if he said it to the Prime Minister yesterday, might well have choked on his tea and shortbread as he struggled to suppress a guffaw, because he goes on, his new Scottish Secretary, Ian Murray of Labour, has already spoken of the Scotland office becoming a, quote, spending department, a significant step that would complete what was unfinished business for his predecessor, Sir Alistair Jack. And he spoke about expanding the current £3 billion programme of direct UK government spending in Scotland. So if Labour are going to come in and they're going to spend money directly, they're not going to give it to the middleman. They're going to spend it directly on things that they should spend it on, which will help people to appreciate the values, the direct values of the union. Then that's all to the good, isn't it? And he talks here about Swinney. He says, the political threat hanging over Swinney is clear. Gripe and grievance from the SNP would provoke a simple response from Keir Starmer. For example, quote, we've tried our best, but these guys really are impossible to work with. What Scotland needs is a different government at Holyrood. And all that would do, of course, is help Scottish Labour in their attempts to win in 2026. So you've got Swinney there, stuck. He's stuck. He's stuck. And a referendum is off the agenda for the short term. But as others and we have also noted, things can turn very fast, and it can depend upon how badly the Labour government at the UK level do, or if they do some kind of game-changing thing, such as Blair did. Blair was cruising along until he made the faux pas of, well, slightly more than a faux pas. It was called the Iraq War, and Labour support just plummeted. And so if Starmer were to make such a mistake, whether in Europe or the Middle East, then again, you would see Labour support plummet in Scotland. So I hope he's aware of those sorts of things. Let's look at some comments. Hi to Oksana, how are you doing? Ian says, Starmer should order a full inquiry into the SNP spending of our money. Well, that takes us nicely onto the SNP spending taxpayers' money, or at least they're not going to be able to spend so much of it now that they've only got 9 MPs. I was struck by this headline in the Daily Record. SNP takes a £10 million hit. What this doesn't say is that's 10 million a year. So they are actually taking a 50 million hit over the course of 5 years. Let me explain. During the last Parliament, all their MPs were entitled to each of them around 200 and, well, at the uppermost level, up to £250,000 spending expenses a year. Each MP could take up to £250,000 to spend on staff mainly, staffing costs, which for their MPs back then was around about £9 million a year the SNP cohort at Westminster was entitled to. On top of that, there's a thing called short money, which I'll get into just in a moment, and I'll explain what that is. But they were entitled to about £1 million worth of short money a year, giving the entire SNP cohort around about an entitlement to £10 million a year, or 50 million over the course of a 5-year Parliament. That's a huge amount of money that they could spend on staffing, on research officers, on press officers, on spin, on all these other things that they got up to force themselves into our consciousness. An unimaginable amount of money, really, when you think about it. I mean, for such an uninspiring group of people. However, now that they've only got 9 MPs, then the amount of money that they are entitled to falls away down falls round about to round about £1 million a year. And so let me just see if it does give exactly the amount of money that they are entitled to. It doesn't specify. Oh, it does. No, it doesn't. It just says what they're losing out on. And they're losing out on approximately 10 million a year when compared to the previous Parliament, or £50 million over the course of 5 years. An incredible amount of money that they're not going to be getting. And of course, that's going to seriously damage their efforts. It's going to really hurt them. The next day, the Reform Party did an article here about the amount of short money that Reform is entitled to in Scotland per se. And it explains what short money is. Short money is given to opposition parties who get at least one MP elected and who get more than 150,000 votes overall. To qualify for short money, a party's candidate, regardless of whether he or she wins the seat, has to get at least 5% of the total votes cast. Once this threshold is met, their party will get £44.53 for every 200 votes that candidate received. Okay. So in Scotland, 47 Reform candidates met the threshold, that is, they saved their deposit, and together they secured a very large number of votes, almost 150,000 votes, if you just include the people who saved the deposit. Meaning that Farage's party will get £32,940 short money per year for their Scottish efforts every year, which will be, after the 5-year period, £165,000 worth of short money just for their candidates in Scotland, just for their Scottish campaign. Doesn't explain how much they're going to rake in overall for the UK, but it will be millions of pounds. So that's also going to help Reform. That's also going to help Reform in a big way. And that's going to be a game changer, because these smaller parties struggle to get funds at all, generally speaking. Good evening to the We Say It podcast. Please, folks, if you're on rumble.com, also check out Nick's We Say It podcast. Just type in We Say It podcast into rumble.com and you'll find Nick and his words of wisdom on a regular basis. Good stuff. Now, let me see, are we on Twitter? Just checking. Yes, we are. King's Speech and Starmer, discussing with that Preston journalist. Now, let's move on. We're going to talk about the contents of the King's Speech with our friend, that Preston journalist, at the bottom of the hour. But for now, let's look at what happened today. Now, today was the official state opening, and that occurs, it occurs after there's been a general election, and it can occur not necessarily on a 12-month cycle, but sometimes every 12 or 18 months, just depending upon the parliamentary year. But it started off, we've got a wee video that we'll just play right now on that.
The King and Queen now leaving Buckingham Palace to make the journey to the Palace of Westminster. They're in the Diamond Jubilee State Coach, which is a very fine coach, and it looks very old, doesn't it? But it was in fact made in 2010 for the late Queen's Diamond Jubilee. That doesn't stop it from being very fine. and I think it is fitted with a few modern comforts.
It's got hydraulic suspension and central heating, among other things. But it's a sort of museum.
Fantastic, fantastic. And of course, as you know, here at A Force for Good, we love our Scottish and British pageantry. And we believe that it plays a very, very important role in the whole concept of the nation. You know, somebody was saying yesterday on Twitter, they were talking about how they were going to be seeing all of this today and so on, and what was the point and so on, and it's not democratic, blah, 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 you know, the whole story. However, as we always say, that a nation is not simply its voting system. A nation consists of its culture. It consists of its general political constitution, which involves voting, but also involves other things. A nation includes its heritage, which is to say its history, which remains today. And it also involves all of these things come together to create an identity, a national identity. And we're very lucky in the United Kingdom. All parts of our kingdom have so much heritage and so much pageantry as well, that it really all knits into a very nice sense of national identity that we like to talk up. And so in that sense, I think the pageantry of the state opening of Parliament reminds us that our political constitution, which we enjoy today, has been forged through the ages. It's not just something that Keir Starmer has thought up today. It's got a tradition that goes way back into the midst of time, right back to the Declaration of Arbroath, right back to the Magna Carta. Some people might even trace it further back, but those are two, at least, of the two foundational written documents of what we now call the United Kingdom. And we wrote about this, actually. We wrote an article called The State Opening of Parliament, and we'll put the link up for the people who are on Facebook and on Twitter as well, just to check that out. And we quoted somebody, a friend of ours who's since passed away. We quoted something that he wrote way back at the start of the 21st century. He said, quote, "The King's speech," or he was saying then the Queen's speech, but the King's speech is an event of grand pageantry and ceremonial, one of elaborate pomp and circumstance designed to register and to emphasize the sovereignty, the dignity, and the majesty of our nationhood, to remind us, the British people, of the glories of our history and the supreme triumph of our achievements in establishing the sublime dignity of democratic government in the mother of parliaments, and all that pertains to our sense of justice, freedom, and the rule of law over the forces of arbitrary power-mongering and dictatorial chicanery. I've always loved that quote. You can read it in full at that article that we wrote about the state opening today. And in that video, they showed the Diamond Jubilee State Coach. And I just want to talk about that for 5 minutes, because that is moving history in and of itself, because the coach, which saw its first outing at the state opening on the 3rd of June 2014, is composed of over 100 elements from British events, British castles, British buildings, British cathedrals, British vessels, British artifacts. And let me just run through some photographs of what I'm talking about here. Let's stick the first one up. Now, that's the picture from today. And if you look to see below Camilla's hand there, you see these little squares that are embedded in the door frame. Well, they're embedded right around the coach. And in each of these little squares is further embedded a little artifact from something in British history. And if nothing is embedded, the actual piece of wood itself is taken from usually a vessel, a boat from British history. Okay, let's look at the next one. Okay, so there you see what I'm talking about there, these little squares. Now, the little paneling, okay. So there you see a close-up. There's a little button from Gallipoli. The next piece is wood from the Mayflower. The next thing is something regarding Douglas Bader. That may be from a Spitfire. Next is a piece of wood from the Franklin expedition of 1845. Next up is an artifact from Robert Baden-Powell. And then moving down, you've got something there. Ah, yes, that's meant to be a sliver of wood from the apple tree that Isaac Newton was sitting under. That's what it's meant to be. Hopefully it is. Next one is something from Robert Stevenson. And then the next thing is some piece of metal from the Flying Scotsman. And so it goes on. There's something from the Code Breaking Centre at Bletchley Park. There's a piece from one of Edmund Hillary's ladders that he used to climb Everest. And let's have a look at the next picture. There we go. These are pieces of wood from Canterbury Cathedral, from the HMS Queen Mary, from Kensington Palace, from HMS Victory, of course, from Trafalgar, a piece of wood from Westminster Abbey, something from the Tower of London, and so on. So you're looking there at British history in motion. British history in motion. I'm also told there was a musket ball from the Battle of Waterloo, and there's a fragment of the bronze cannon somewhere from which every Victoria Cross is cast. Okay. And there's even a shard from the Stone of Destiny, which sits under the seats. And that's the part of the Stone of Destiny placed in a capsule right there. Okay. And that's looking back on what somebody said is like a fairy tale coach. Absolutely. A fairy tale coach. And that the gilded frieze is what they call that, the decoration along the top. And that features the national emblems of the Rose of England, the Thistle of Scotland, the Flax of Ireland, and the Leek of Wales. Okay. And then it says there, the crown on the top is made from wood reclaimed from HMS Victory. Okay, that's the crown being carried in today. And I just want to mention about the gilded frieze there. It's all made from wood. People look on it and like they'll say, "Oh, that's all gold. What an extravagance!" No, it's wood. It's just been gilded. There it is. That's wood carving that's been gilded with gold paint to make it look like it's actually gold. And the gold coach as well that's a wooden coach, and it's been gilded with gold leaf, as they call it. And but the thing is, with the Scottish, we also have a Scottish coach as well, which needs to get an outing. It needs to get an outing. We thought we'd maybe see it back on the 3rd of July. We thought we'd see it last year when the King came up to St. Giles as well, but they keep it locked away for some reason. They need to get it out. They need to get it out, and they shouldn't listen to any of these Republic people who complain about the cost, because even if they pushed the King down the Royal Mile in a wheelbarrow. They'd still complain about the cost of the wheelbarrow. So we don't need to give them any. We don't need to give them any attention. Let's get rid of somebody who's come on here, who's saying lots of naughty stuff on Facebook. Okay. Now, let's just bring on our friend and acquaintance, Ash. Before I do that, I've got a question for you. If you haven't done this before, it is all you need to do is send the answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and the winner will get a copy of a wee book for the union sent to them tomorrow. Okay? And the question is, what famous royal has their birthday today? Which famous royal's birthday is it today? Send your answer to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and you can get this worth a £5 whizzing its way to you for free tomorrow morning. Okay, folks, let's bring on Ash. Say hello to Ash. Hey, Ash, good to see you.
Evening, you okay? Evening, everybody.
Good. I'm good. I'm absolutely good. And thank you for coming on. And thank you for all the work that you do, which is absolutely incredible. The number of people that you've got on following you on YouTube. And when it must have been about 2 years ago.
Sorry?
It must have been about 2 years ago that you started your YouTube channel.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it was about that. Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 24,000 now. It's going well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you dedicate so much time to it as well. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Oh yeah, it's hard work.
Fantastic.
It's worth it as well. It saves me boring my friends by talking about politics because they don't want to hear it. So I might as well tell people that actually want to talk about it.
But you know what? That's one of the great things about modern communication methods is you can do exactly that. If you don't have an immediate circle of friends who are interested, you can very quickly find an online circle of friends. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you watched the whole of the King's speech today. I always hesitate because it's really Starmer's speech. The King reads it out.
Yeah.
Some foreign people might think that the King dreams it all up and decides to tell everybody his latest plans on, gender reassignment or net zero or whatever. But of course, it's Keir Starmer's speech that's read out by the head of state. Did you get a chance to watch it in between your work?
I watched bits of it. To be honest with you, I wasn't glued to it because I could have guessed most of what was going to be in it anyway. Big state. Big government, and to be honest with you, I am a monarchist, but I think Charles would be quite happy reading most of that stuff out because we know what he thinks about a lot of things anyway. So I think think he'd be more than happy to go along with all this GB energy, net zero stuff, and all that. I think he'll be over the moon tonight.
I think that he's for some reason he's got a thing about that which we're best just to leave to him on that. But certainly you and I know the absurdity of much of that. But that GB energy thing, do you understand what they're trying to do with that? They said they were going to set up well, do you know what it is?
In a nutshell, it's going to be net zero on steroids. They're going to try and do everything they say through what they're calling renewable and sustainable methods of heating your homes, etc. They're saying it's going to make bills cheaper and make them more cost effective, but it's not, is it? If this was going to work and you're going to nationalize something like this, then you need fossil fuels. There's absolutely no question about it. And Ed Miliband thinks he can walk around already trying to cancel 240,000 jobs at least in this country by taking away oil and gas licenses. And he thinks he can now do all this by 2030 without nuclear power. He's off his rocker. And I'm afraid Labour are going to go along with it. And I've got absolutely no idea why Starmer is being so stupid, because they must know. The civil servants must know. The civil servants, it's reported, even told Ed Miliband, this is a bad idea. You can't do this. It's too quick. You're going to screw people. But he doesn't care. He's just gone along with it anyway. And I think it's because Dale Vince is one of their main donors and gave them millions of pounds. And he owns that Ecotricity that just so happens to build things like wind turbines and then ship them over here. So that's what's going on here. And they're trying to please the biggest donors. And I'm afraid it's going to cost you and me and everybody watching this a hell of a lot of money on your bills. If renewables were so efficient and so cheap, and they try and say they're cheaper than the gas and oil, if they were that cheap, then they wouldn't be putting 20% on top of your energy bills now to subsidize this industry. And if it was so profitable, the private sector would be all over it, but they're not. They don't want anything to do with it because the government won't give them big enough subsidies, because the money that they're going to have to spend on it is ridiculous and they won't get a return on it.
That's a good point, isn't it? It's like, where's the private sector in all of this? And if they're not seeing any return for their money, then clearly this is a failing industry. Yeah, that's a good point. Now, you made the direct conclusion there that it's as a consequence of a big funder of the Labour Party putting a lot of money into the Labour Party for exactly that, and that could be so as well. I mean, that's probably a big element of it. Sometimes I wonder if it's almost like they don't want us, the nation, to succeed, because for an economy to work, it needs cheap energy. For any economy to be successful, the energy has to be cheap. And that's been since the dawn of time. When you acquire cheap energy, then you get a successful economy. So people who are pushing inefficient energy methods and extremely expensive energy methods, I mean, they're undermining the economy straight away. And that's to say nothing of impoverishing the actual population.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you wondered, is this part of a wider agenda to literally impoverish not just Britain, but the West in general, to pull down our economies in some way in order to benefit economies in the rest of the world or something? I know this is just when one's casting around to figure out how this can be happening when it's against all of history, all of economic wisdom. It's baffling. Absolutely.
Look at what we're
baffling.
importing. We're importing shale gas when we've got it in this country. We've got gas and oil in the North Sea. We've got coal mines in Wales that the Tories were going to reopen. Labour have already scrapped that now as well, so that's gone as well. So now, and then they say, well, we don't want to fund economies like Russia. I don't know if you've seen, I mean, I don't want to get too much into the war situation, but Russia's economy, since that war started, has absolutely flourished as the West tried to ruin it, because they're still selling all their gas and oil. The thing is, it's going to countries like India and other places. They're still buying it for fairly cheap prices. And then we're the idiots that are buying it off these countries, and it's being shipped over here anyway with a premium price on it. So we're still buying Russian fossil fuels. It's just that they don't want to tell you that. And all of a sudden, this is greener. These wind turbines, hardly any, next to none, get built in this country. What happens is they get shipped over here on massive tankers, which nobody talks about either, because it's one of the most polluting ways to transport things across the sea like that. But it gets sent over here, and then they've got a lifespan of maximum 20 years. They can't be recycled. Look at some of these countries that have had wind turbines for years. They've got field, acre after acre of fields with wind turbines in them that cannot be recycled, and they just sit there rotting away. Well, they don't even rot, they just rust and sit there, damaging the ecology of a country. Yeah. And then they tell you this is good for the planet. And some of these, by the way, some of the ones in Scotland are actually being run, wind turbines, believe it or not, on fossil fuel generators.
No way.
I saw a video a while ago. I can't remember where it was exactly now. One of the wind farms in Scotland, and it was being run on fossil fuel generators. That is the madness of these people. Unbelievable.
That's a good point, though. Again, about the Russian thing. But you would think we would say we'll be energy independent, so we're not dependent upon Russia or any other country.
Yeah.
We're not. You would think that would be a natural a natural way of looking at it. Energy independence, an absolutely essential principle of national sovereignty. You don't really have national sovereignty if you can't be energy independent. It's just one of the basics. We wrote an article that will part of a 10-part series on fundamental principles, and energy independence is one of them. Always has been, always will be. And Christopher here says the Chinese and Indians are happily burning coal in massive amounts.
The Chinese are building a coal-fueled power station. I think it's one a week.
Yeah.
And they think that by you giving up your your gas boiler, you're going to change the world. When they've got a population of over 1 billion people. They've got so many people over there. They've had to put a limit on how many children people can have. Yet they think that a 60 million country like this is going to make a blind bit of difference to the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've got to lead by example. The world stage. I couldn't give a toss what we look like on the world stage. I just want people to have cheap energy, which they could have if we had some politicians that had a bit of backbone about them. But unfortunately, we're stuck with a government with a massive majority that can do what the hell it wants, and there's nothing anybody can do to stop it.
Yes, indeed. The only break on them is the fear that they'll do something and lose votes to like an upcoming party, like Reform, for example. That's one break on their right-hand side. On their left-hand side, they're threatened in a few seats also by the Greens.
Yeah, they are.
And so then they've got to think, well, we've got to talk up our green agenda to those people when we talk to them. And then when we talk to the Reform type ex-Labour supporters, we've got to talk that down and talk up energy independence and so on. Do you think that nationalising the railways do you think that's going to make much of a difference? That was one of the things he was thinking about, wasn't it? Or saying that he's going to do.
As well. Well, I can't see how it's going to make anything better. I'm sure many people watching this now, I do vaguely. I was only young. Remember British Rail, and I remember how bad British Rail was. I'm sure many of us do as well. Privatisation, has it made things much, much, much better? Probably not. Is it cheaper to run? Yes, because it's private companies employing staff. So it's cheaper for the economy to run it. Is it really going to help us by buying all these companies now? I don't know how many different providers there are, but you're going to have to buy them out of all the contracts. You're going to have to get all the trains. You're going to have to get all the staff. That's all coming out of the public purse. It's going to be one big, expensive, I think, failed experiment. And Starmer has also said he's going to strengthen loosen the rules around trades unions, meaning that they no longer have to vote now and get a majority to call a strike. They no longer he's going to do things like the minimum service limits on people. He's going to allow people to call lightning strikes when they just take place at drop of a hat. And these are all things that are going to come back to bite him, because if he does one thing wrong and these railway workers decide they want a 40% pay rise, Starmer says no, right, that's it, roll out. It's going to be like on the buses, isn't it? Remember on the buses with Jack in it, when he goes, all out, brothers. It's going to be just like that every time the government says no.
It could be back to the 70s again.
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember the 70s. Len Murray. I always remember that name, Len Murray. He was some trade union leader for was it British Leyland or something like that? And in Birmingham. And they always seemed to be striking. And all these nationalised industries were always striking. That's how I remember 1970s. Cars didn't start and everybody's on strike. That was the 1970s, basically. And then Thatcher came along and somehow it seemed to she seemed to somehow change that. I don't know quite what she did. But
she changed all the rules. These rules that Starmer now wants to get rid of. By
right.
stopping, she outsmarted the unions. What was his name? The guy that was mayor of London, Ken Livingstone.
Yeah.
He had a saying after Thatcher took him to the cleaners. They had a saying about him. He was he was a trades unionist who had a small house and a big union, and he finished up having a big house and a small union because he made a lot of money out of it. And he also destroyed his own union because Thatcher changed the rules so strict on the unions. That's the way it should be. We can't allow people to, like you said, go back to the 70s. But that's what Labour, it seems, are trying to do for some reason.
Yeah, they've got this kind of attachment to striking and so on. I'm not against trade unions or anything like that, but at the same time, if you're trying to run a country, especially these critical services, there has to be certain rules over how you can bring the whole thing to a sticky end or to a stop. There has to be. Well, time will tell whether it will make much difference or not. I don't think there's a direct comparison between British Rail in the 70s and today in a way, because I think things are better today in that the idea of public relations is a lot better. You know, I don't think in the 70s, the whole idea that the customer has to come first and all that kind of stuff, I don't think that ever really figured very highly in the whole British Rail thing. But now I think it might be better. So it's a slightly different cultural environment is what I'm trying to say, that this nationalisation is coming around in. So it might be better, but what he could do, and what Labour always do, is they make things better and then they do something deliberately to make the whole thing worse. So, you know, the trains might run in time, but what will happen is that they're always on strike, so they never get to run on time. But if they actually went to work, they would run on time, but everybody's always out and striking. So you know, we don't see the glory of it. But that's definitely something.
Seen, doesn't it? How bad it's going to be? I don't know myself. But
yeah,
I don't know if you saw, but I don't. Also, sorry, on the King's Speech as well, Labour had apparently dropped all commitments to ending the small boats and the illegal immigration crisis, and the legal immigration crisis as well. And the pressure on them is so much to do something about it that they actually put it back into their speech at the very last minute to do something about it. Yeah, because over the last couple of days, we've had record numbers. Before the general election, I did a video pointing out a Telegraph journalist had been over to Calais to speak to these migrants, and they were literally waiting for July the 4th, and they were waiting for Labour to win the election, and then they were coming over here. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing over 1,000 already since Labour got into power. And it's going to get worse and worse under Labour.
Yeah. Well, I'll just bring up what the papers were saying today about what was in that regarding border controls. And it says border security. We'll just get rid of that bottom banner. Border security, asylum and immigration. To use counter-terrorism style powers to investigate the people smuggling gangs. That sounds kind of macho, but what that means in reality, who knows? Tougher penalties introduced for advertising people smuggling and supplying materials to organized crime gangs. Tougher penalties to smash the gangs, as they say. The King's Speech confirms the new command will be funded by scrapping the Rwanda deportation scheme, which will save 100 million in future payments. Presumably that the Rwanda deportation scheme would cost. However, there's going to be but there's going to be a cost. There's just going to be an equal and opposite cost, if not a bigger cost, of keeping them here in this country. And this is what worries me at the bottom here. It also pledges to clear the backlog of asylum claims, including some 90,000 migrants who would have been sent to Rwanda, and end the use of hotels to house them. Well, where are they going to sleep? You know, they're not going to be sleeping under a bridge. What they're going to be doing is moving these people into new housing and new accommodation centres that they're going to be building all over the country. You know, when Starmer says he's going to be building so many more new houses, these are not houses for us. These are not houses for the indigenous British people. These are houses for the thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people who are coming over illegally every week, every month. Who's
going to pay for that? It's going to be you and me. Because Rachel Reeves said, Labour are going to build, 1.5 million, wasn't it, in 5 years? So 300,000 homes a year. Then she said, well, we're not going to do it. Actually, the private sector is going to do it. So every time I've seen a new build estate go up, the decent homes, most of them get filled. Some don't even get filled because the average house price in this country is now 285,000, which no first-time buyer can possibly afford to get a 10% deposit for. Then she said, well, the private sector can build all these social housing. I'm like, no, they're not. They would never do that because they're going to lose so much money. I think it's 15% of each new build estate now has to have 15%, I think, social housing on it. And all they do is they come to the end of building the proper houses, not proper houses, you know what I mean, the more valuable houses. And then they say, oh, we've gone bust, and they rename the company and they move on to the next place, and they don't build the social housing. So
really?
none of this social housing is going to get built. So when you say they're going to put these migrants into, I don't know, 4 or 5 bedroom houses or something like that the average Brit couldn't afford, who's going to be paying to put them in there? It probably costs more than putting them in hotels.
Exactly.
They've taken away the only deterrent we had. And Rwanda might have been expensive, but it was acting as a deterrent. The numbers were down. People were leaving this country to go to Ireland and places like that and go back to the EU because they were so frightened of being sent to Rwanda. The Tory government had detained hundreds of people waiting to go out on the first few flights. Labour, on their first day, said, no, it's all right, you can all go free. So they've let them out into the country. Now, we don't know where they are. They could be anybody. They could have done anything, anywhere in the world. And they could be next door to you, for all you know. You simply don't know where they are now. And that 90,000 you just referenced, that's going to be an amnesty. They're going to say, everyone, off you go, all in. That's all it's going to be. They'll do nothing.
Yes. That's in this article. Labour will allow 100,000 migrants to apply for asylum in quote-unquote effective amnesty. That's from the Telegraph a week ago, 9th of July. Some 90,000 migrants earmarked for deportation to Rwanda will be among those who will be processed through the asylum system. And they will be coming to a village and town near you.
Yeah.
According to Isabel Oakeshott here, Labour won't stop the boats. It'll send migrants to your town.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that as being a big issue, which is going to come into everybody's consciousness over the next 5 years. And how we as the British people respond to this is going to determine the future of the nation and whether we can even stay British, English, Scottish, Welsh. The Irish are struggling to remain Irish right now. And of course, they have a totally traitorous class, which is as bad, if not worse, as our traitorous class, and also made up of people who don't have a clue anyway what's going on. I mean, I was watching the Irish Justice Minister, some 38-year-old woman who wouldn't know one end of the immigration situation from another. Other than that, it's, we don't want to be nasty and to immigrants. We don't want to sound racist, so we'll just let the entire world come in. She's not operating on any kind of fundamental philosophy other than some kind of mild or ridiculous anti-racist feeling that it's maybe the right thing to do is just allow everybody to come and live in the Republic of Ireland. Now, I mean to say, Patrick Pearse would be turning in his grave. Patrick Pearse is turning in his grave along with that Connolly fellow and the rest of them, I'm sure.
The irony, though, isn't it, that Sinn Féin, who we all know were involved with the IRA, didn't want anybody taking over Ireland. Ireland must remain Irish and all this stuff. They were so scared of the British Army going in there and taking over the place that they fought back. Then now they're happy to dilute the entire population by importing these people. And I wouldn't incite anyone to violence, but I'll tell you what, this country needs some sort of Irish response, because I've got absolute full respect for those Irish citizens that are out there on the street now, and they are doing their damn best to make sure that these migrants don't get moved into their towns, their communities, their hotels, and any spare housing that's lying around.
Yeah, absolutely. Good for them, and they've got the whole might of the state. And it's really is upsetting to watch these horrible riot police just wading in on these just very working class people who are upset about the invasion of their villages and towns, and they're getting beaten with batons and dragged off and pepper sprayed and stuff like that. And you just think the Irish state, the Irish Republic, our state would do exactly the same thing,
You want to be careful, those Irish police, though. We've seen what Irish people do when they rise up. When as we saw when the British Army went to Northern Ireland, they want to be very careful because they might get a bigger response than they ever dreamed of if they push people too far. Yes.
Well, they've got it figured out, and they know who to target on those sorts of things, in the sense of who the leaders of the resistance are. and to prevent it going to that level, they're just hoping that they can just crush the will, I think, of the people, and prevent them. That's what they're going to try to do in this country as well over the next few years. I mean, Starmer's starting out today with these sorts of things, but it could get a lot worse. But from the sublime to the ridiculous, what's this smoking ban? You can't sell you can't sell cigarettes to somebody born after 2009. So does that well, does that mean like what's somebody born in 2009 just now will be like 15, thereabouts. So when they become 18, does that mean they can't buy it legally?
No, they'll be able to, won't they? It's anybody born after that won't be able to buy them, which again is ridiculous. Fine, we all know smoking's bad for you, but if you choose to do it, that is your personal choice. That is your free will. And if you've got the money to do it, then fair play to you, because I couldn't afford to smoke. But it's absolutely ridiculous that they think they can get involved in things like this. I've got the craziest policy they've talked about. I'm not joking here. This is absolute fact. Talking about controlling how much food people eat and how much processed food people eat. So what they're saying is they could even look into how many toppings you're allowed to have on a pizza and how big that pizza will be. That is that is
the shit. Oh, that's you sure you haven't been pranked with that one? That's
no. Honest to God, that was on GB News. It was on Talk TV. They've all said it. This is the kind of crap. I'm trying my best not to swear about this. I swear to God that this is the kind of nanny statism that they want to get involved in. There was even something on school uniforms. I completely forgot what it was now. They even mentioned school uniforms. They think they can get involved in every aspect of your lives, and that's what happens when you vote for socialist parties like this. They got through the general election campaign by doing and saying absolutely nothing because the Tories were so useless. Mm-hmm. Then they scraped through. I know they got a big majority, but as Jeremy Corbyn called it, it's a loveless landslide. They got a 0.1% vote share increase from 2019 when they got levered, and this time they've come out with a big majority. Starmer is there by default, and I give him 3 years at most before he's ousted by his own party.
That's interesting. That's interesting, and you are seldom wrong, so you might well be right on that one. We're at the top of the hour, so let me just run through your contact details again. You are that Preston Journalist, and you are on YouTube at where are we here? Let's bring this up. youtube.com/that Preston Journalist. Very good site. And also on x.com/AKWriting88. AKWriting88. Let's keep that up. Ash, that Preston Journalist. Good. Okay, Ash. Well, that was a very quick half hour. Went very quickly. And I just want to thank you again for that. And wish you the very best. We must have you back on. We will have you back on because things are going to move very rapidly. There's lots of things we could have talked tonight about, but we didn't get round to.
There'll be other times, like you said.
Yes, there'll be absolutely other times. So, Ash, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's get your addresses up again. And we'll see. There we go. Let's say good night.
Thank you very much. Cheers. Cheers, Alistair.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Fantastic. Ash, that Preston Journalist. Always good entertainment. Always good to give us some ideas to think about as well on the show. Please do follow him if you can, folks. And please do follow us as well on YouTube. Subscribe to us on Twitter. Please follow us. We have been stuck on almost exactly the same number for 3 years. Followers, 28,107. And sometimes it goes to 28,103, and sometimes it goes to 28,115. And we've been stuck there for 3 years. So I don't know what Twitter's doing to us, unfortunately. It's messing around with us. And but what can you do about that? But you can at least try to follow us and hope that you continue to get our material. And give us a retweet as well. Get this out, because the system is against us. The system is very much against us. But you can help. by going to amazon.co.uk and getting your copy of One Big Country, a big book for the Union, Volume 1. All you need to do, go to amazon.com or amazon.co.uk, I should say, and search for One Big Country. And that's Volume 1 of a 5-volume series. And I'm glad to say that as a consequence of our modest crowdfunder, we have raised enough money to do Volume 2, which we'll be producing in November in time for December. Now, I'm told there's no winner of the prize tonight, but that's fine. We'll have winners in previous, what's the opposite of previous? In the shows that come after. In the shows that come after, of which there will be many. Today is the 106th. Today is the 106th. Good evening, Britain. Derek says, great show again from the team. Keep up the work. Keep up the good work, guys. That's probably going to be the screenshot for this show. Excellent. Okay, folks, it just remains for me to say we will be back next week. We'll have a guest also from America who will also be talking about politics, no doubt. And we will see you then. So just remains for me to say God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.